3 weeks ago, I got a phone call no child should ever receive. A calm voice on the other end said, "Miss Walker, your parents have been arrested. They were found inside your former home, swinging baseball bats at the furniture. They said they were looking for you." I stood there, on the porch of my new place, holding the railing, because my knees suddenly felt like they weren't mine anymore. My parents, the people who raised me, the people who taught me to always tell the truth, to help others, to never cause harm. They had broken into a stranger's home because they thought it was still mine, and because they believed I had ruined their lives. But the truth, they were the ones who had been trying to ruin mine for years. My name is Daniel, and I need to tell you how my own family, my blood, nearly destroyed everything I worked for. A house I spent decades saving for. A future I was finally proud of. A peace I had waited my whole life to feel. And all of it almost vanished the moment they demanded I sell my home to pay off a $150,000 debt my brother created through lies he still refuses to admit. You're going to hear how my parents turned on me, how they stalked me, how they hired a private investigator just to find my new address, and why they ended up in handcuffs, standing inside a house that wasn't even mine anymore. But there's something else, too. Something I didn't know back then. Something that didn't come to light until the very end. A secret sitting quietly behind all the noise, the anger, the manipulation. And when you hear it, you might understand why everything happened the way it did. Or you might be even more shocked than I was. Before I walk you into this story, before we go back to the family barbecue, where everything started, I want to invite you to stay with me through the whole journey. If you're listening while cooking, driving, or just trying to rest after a long day, go ahead and hit subscribe so you don't lose your place. There are twists ahead that even I didn't see coming, and one truth at the end that changed everything. Now, let me take you back to the evening my family decided my house didn't belong to me anymore. And the moment I realized they would do anything, absolutely anything, to take it. I was 42 when everything finally came to a head. Old enough to know better, but still young enough to hope that maybe, just maybe, family could change. Maybe they could grow the way I had grown. Maybe they could respect boundaries the way I'd learned to respect my own. But that hope didn't survive the afternoon of our family barbecue. For most of my adult life, I'd lived quietly. I worked long shifts as a machine repair technician. One of those jobs where your hands come home coated in grease and your back reminds you you're not 20 anymore. I saved every spare dollar, carried a lunchbox instead of buying food, skipped vacations, skipped new cars, skipped everything except the necessities, all because I had one dream: owning a modest home where I could finally exhale. And last spring, I did it. I bought a small, sun-washed house on the edge of town, a place with creaky floors, a porch swing, and enough quiet to hear your own thoughts. I love that house more than I'd loved anything in years, not because it was big or fancy, but because it was mine. Mine in a way nothing else had ever been. My parents knew how hard I worked for it. Or at least, I thought they did. My father, Earl, was from the old school shout loud, apologize never, and believed that whoever sacrificed the most was the hero of the family. My mother, Linda, believed in loyalty, but in a way that always seemed to benefit my older brother. Mark. Mark was the golden boy, the one everyone excused, the one everyone defended, even when the truth was staring them right in the face. He was 45 and still chasing shortcuts to success car flipping, crypto, sports betting, business ventures that lasted 5 minutes before falling apart. Every time he crashed, my parents caught him. Every time he burned money, they threw in more. And every time he failed, somehow he was still the one they praised. So when they invited me to a barbecue to celebrate your new house, I let myself believe it was genuine. I shouldn't have. We were barely 10 minutes into the afternoon when I noticed something off. My mother kept watching me, the way a person watches the door when they're waiting for someone. My father kept asking questions about the house, not the kind people ask because they're happy for you, but the kind people ask when they're calculating something. How big is the living room again? You get a good price on it. What's the place worth now? I answered politely, but inside my stomach began to tighten. Then Mark strutted over with a beer in his hand and a smile, too wide to be real. "Danny boy," he said, slapping my shoulder. "We need to talk. Big news." Big news. Every disaster in my life had started with those 2 words. He herded us to the patio table like we were holding a board meeting. My parents sat down eagerly, like they already knew what was coming. Mark cleared his throat and launched into a speech charts. Numbers, profits, the whole show. His newest idea, a custom auto garage. He said he needed capital to get it off the ground. $150,000. To be exact. I listened quietly. I let him finish. And then every head at that table turned toward me. Not subtly, not accidentally, deliberately. It was like watching a trap snap shut. Mark spread his hands. "You've got assets now. Danny, a house, stability, and you know I'll pay you back. It's family, family." That word again. The word that always seemed to mean do something for Mark. No questions asked. I shook my head slowly. "I'm not selling my house. Mark, not for this." My mother's face fell instantly. Not with disappointment, no. With calculation. "Honey, think about it. You're single. You don't need so much space. Your brother needs you." My father leaned back, arms crossed, like a judge waiting to pass sentence. "Your brother's trying to build something. You've always been the one who held back. Don't be selfish now." Selfish. Me, the man who worked double shifts, who saved pennies in jars, who never asked them for a thing. I kept my voice calm. "I'm not selling my home. I'm not funding this." The temperature at the table changed instantly. Mark slammed his beer down so hard, some spilled over the edge. "You'd really let my life fall apart when you have the power to help." I looked at him. "Your life isn't falling apart. Your choices are." My father stood up so quickly, his chair scraped the concrete. "If you won't support this family," he said, jaw clenched, "then maybe you're not part of it." There it was, the line that ended any illusion I had left. I sat still, hands folded, suddenly feeling like a stranger in the home I grew up in. My mother whispered, "Please don't make this harder than it has to be." Mark stared at me like I'd betrayed him, when in truth, he'd been draining us all for years. Something broke inside me that afternoon, but not in the way they expected. I didn't break down. I broke free. And as I walked away from that table, I had no idea that their resentment would grow into something darker, something unhinged, something that would bring baseball bats to a house that no longer belonged to me. I didn't plan to cut contact with them after that barbecue. I just needed space, quiet room, to let the anger settle into something I could understand. But sometimes silence becomes its own kind of truth. Days passed, then weeks, and not one of them reached out to check if I was all right. Not one of them asked why I felt so strongly or whether something deeper was going on. The only messages I received in that time were short, irritated, and always about the same thing. Have you reconsidered Mark is waiting? You're making this harder on all of us. There was no, how are you, son? No, can we talk? Just pressure and guilt and expectation. So I stopped replying. 3 months drifted by. And you know what? My life became peaceful in a way I'd never known. I spent quiet evenings on my porch swing, listening to the crickets. I patched up little things around the house, made coffee in the mornings without feeling rushed, without feeling watched. I started sleeping better, breathing easier. That's when I realized something I'd been scared to admit for years. Peace shouldn't feel like a luxury, but in my family, it always had. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I logged into social media just to see what Mark was up to. I wish I hadn't. There, he was leaning against a rented sports car, flashing cash, tagging casinos, smiling like a man whose life was overflowing with success. A week later, another photo, bottle service at a nightclub, new tattoos, new clothes, new business partners. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was really happening. Mark wasn't building a business. He was living like a man with money to burn, and none of it was his. I closed the app and leaned back, letting the truth wash over me. My parents weren't worried about Mark. They were worried about losing the illusion that he would someday become the man they kept pretending he already was. And then came the email. It arrived just after sunrise, on a Tuesday, sent from my mother's old account. A short subject line. Daniel, please. I opened it reluctantly, expecting another attempt to guilt trip me. But instead, I saw 8 words that froze my chest. Mark's life is in danger. We need you home. Danger. The word hit me harder than I expected. No matter how angry I was, the instinct to protect family, the instinct they had used against me my entire life, still lived somewhere deep inside. For the rest of the morning, I couldn't focus on anything. I kept pacing from room to room, replaying every worst-case scenario. Had Mark borrowed money from someone dangerous? Was he sick? Had something happened that truly was beyond his control? By noon, I wrote back, I'll come on Saturday. The drive to my parents' house that weekend felt like moving through fog. When I turned onto their street, I noticed something immediately. Their place looked worn. The porch light was broken. The lawn was patchy. The house felt like it had aged 10 years in 3 months. But what really caught my attention were the 2 vehicles parked in the driveway. Mark's lifted truck with oversized tires and a glossy red coupe I had never seen before. My stomach twisted. If he was truly in danger, as my mother had written, he didn't look like a man who was struggling. I parked along the curb and sat in my car for a moment, just breathing, trying to gather myself. But the moment I reached the porch, the door swung open like someone had been standing behind it, waiting for me. My mother looked exhausted. Her hair was unbrushed, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for mine. "Oh, Daniel, Thank God you came. Inside, the entire family was gathered like a tribunal. My father in his recliner, arms crossed, Mark on the couch beside him, staring down at the floor. No one spoke right away. Finally, my mother broke the silence. Your brother is in terrible trouble. I glanced at Mark. He didn't look injured. He didn't look sick. He didn't even look scared, just uncomfortable. Like a man caught doing something he didn't want to admit. What kind of trouble, I asked. My father answered instead. He owes money. A lot of money. To people you don't want to cross. I let the words settle. How much? Mark's voice came out low, almost ashamed. $150,000, I repeated. He nodded. I looked at each of them in turn, then back at Mark. And who exactly does he owe? My father didn't flinch. They're dangerous. Son, they've been calling, threatening. We're afraid for his life. Something about the whole setup felt wrong, too dramatic, too rehearsed. But my mother leaned forward, tears spilling down her cheeks. Daniel, please. You're our only hope. And in that moment, I felt myself standing at a crossroads I had walked toward my entire life, the place where their need became my burden, where their fear became my responsibility, where their mistakes became mine to fix. What I didn't know then, what none of us knew, was that this plea for help was only the beginning, and the truth behind it was far more twisted than anything they had confessed. I took a slow breath before speaking again, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm not agreeing to anything until you tell me exactly what's going on. No more half-truths. No more dramatics. My father bristled immediately. We're telling you. He snapped. Mark owes $150,000 to men who don't wait patiently. They've been calling every day. They said they know where he stays. They said bad things will happen if he doesn't pay. I looked at Mark. He couldn't meet my eyes. Not once. What were you doing with that kind of money? I asked him. He swallowed hard. I invested, he muttered. A business thing. It didn't pan out. I leaned back in my chair. A business thing. I repeated. That's what we're calling it. My father shot me a warning glare. This isn't the time for judgment. Actually, I said quietly, it's exactly the time for it. Because the story didn't add up. Mark looked uncomfortable. Yes, but he didn't look terrified. My parents, on the other hand, looked like actors who had memorized lines but hadn't rehearsed the emotions to go with them. I turned to my mother. Who are these people he owes money to? She wiped her tears. We don't know their names. They just call and threaten. They said they'll come after him. And us. They said they'll take everything. I folded my arms. So call the police. Both my parents reacted instantly, too instantly. My father barked. Police can't help with this. My mother shook her head violently. No, no, no. You don't understand. If we involve the police, they'll retaliate. Retaliate, threaten, come after us. It was too dramatic, too convenient, like a script written for maximum fear, not maximum truth. My gaze drifted to Mark again. Is that what they said? Word for word? Mark hesitated. Just a beat. Barely noticeable unless you'd grown up reading every flicker on his face. The way I had. It's close enough, he muttered. I sat forward. Close enough isn't exactly the same, is it? My father slammed his palm on the arm of his recliner. Daniel, enough of this? Your brother is in danger. We need real solutions, not interrogation. And then my mother said, the line I had been bracing for. ever since I arrived. You need to sell your house. There it was, spoken softly, but with all the force of a hammer. You're single, she continued. You don't need all that space. You could get a nice apartment. Something small, something manageable. And Mark could survive this. Survive what I asked. Because so far, all I've heard are vague claims from people who know exactly how to push my guilt buttons. I expected my mother to argue. I expected my father to explode. I expected Mark to beg. But instead, the room fell quiet. Too quiet. That was when I realized something important. They weren't trying to save Mark's life. They were trying to save their illusion of him. Because if Mark failed again, and this time, in a way that hurt all of them, the truth would finally be undeniable. And they couldn't handle that. My father leaned forward, voice low and stern. You have the means to save your brother. A good son would step up. Something inside me snapped. Not with anger, not with fear, with clarity. A good son, I said, would not be expected to bankrupt himself for someone else's repeated mistakes. My mother gasped, softly. Mark finally looked up, eyes full of accusation, rather than remorse. You're heartless, he whispered. After everything I've done for you. I blinked. What have you done for me? He scrambled for an answer, but found none, because there wasn't one. I stood up slowly. No, I'm not selling my house. I'm not giving you money. And I'm not sacrificing my life so Mark can avoid the consequences of his choices. My father stood too, chest puffed, like he was trying to intimidate me the way he used to when I was 10. If something happens to him, he said, pointing at Mark, his blood will be on your hands. I let out a tired breath. I'm not responsible for the choices he made long before I walked in here today. And then Mark finally cracked. You don't get it, he shouted. They're coming after me. They said they'll show up any day now. They said. He stopped mid-rant as my mother gripped his arm too tightly. In that frozen moment, everything clicked. They were afraid, yes, but not for their safety. They were afraid because they had reached the end of what they were capable of covering up. And now they wanted me to pick up the slack. I looked at each of them one last time. If you're telling the truth, I said quietly, there are people who can help you. Financial advisors, lawyers, the authorities. But I'm done being the fix for every crisis. I'm done being the scapegoat when things go wrong. I'm done being the wallet you expect me to open on command. No one stopped me as I walked toward the front door. No one apologized. No one called after me with love or warmth or even doubt. Just silence, heavy, resentful silence. I didn't know it yet, but that silence was about to grow into something far louder, something dangerous, something I never imagined my family capable of. When I left my parents' house that day, I thought the worst was behind me. I thought I had drawn a boundary that even if they didn't like it, they would eventually respect. But I underestimated something important. Desperation turns people into versions of themselves you never imagined. For about a week, everything was quiet. I went back to my routine, fixed a leaking faucet, spent evenings reading on the porch, tried to shake off the heaviness of that strange reunion. But deep down, a quiet unease had settled in my chest. Not panic, just a dull throb that wouldn't go away. Then, one Thursday morning, I heard the unmistakable sound of gravel crunching beneath tires in my driveway. At first, I didn't think much of it. Delivery drivers came through the neighborhood all the time, but something made me look out the front window anyway. And when I did, my stomach dropped. There they were, my parents, walking up my driveway like they owned the place, Like this was just another Saturday afternoon visit. Like the fight we'd had, the accusations, the threats, none of it had happened. I opened the front door, but kept one hand braced against it, blocking their entrance. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice already tense. My mother lifted her chin with a kind of pride that didn't fit the situation. "Mark hired a private investigator," she said. "That's how we found the new address. A private investigator. To find me." My father brushed past me without waiting for permission. My mother followed. They stepped inside as if my home, my sanctuary, still belonged to them. I stood there for a moment, stunned at their audacity, before closing the door and turning to face them. My father was already walking through the living room, eyes scanning the space like he was pricing it. "This is a nice house," he said after a long pause, as if I hadn't spent 20 years working for it. "A lot of equity in a place like this." My mother wandered toward the dining area, touching surfaces, opening cabinets, inspecting everything. "It's more than you need, Daniel," she murmured. "So much space for one person. Seems wasteful." I felt something sharp twist inside me. "This is my home," I said quietly. "You weren't invited here." My mother turned to me, with tears already forming. "Mark is terrified. Daniel, those men called again yesterday. They know where he and Linda are staying. They said the deadline is coming. If he doesn't pay, something awful is going to happen." I shook my head. "Then go to the police." My father spun around. "We told you we can't do that. These people won't stop at a police report." I took a breath, steadying my voice. "What do you want from me?" My mother reached for my hand. "We want you to sell the house," she whispered, as if saying it softly made it more reasonable. "You're young. You can start over. You'll earn another house someday." "You're not too old?" I asked gently. My father stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You told me," I reminded him, "that you couldn't help Mark because you were too old to start over. You said selling your house would destroy you. But now, you want me to sell mine, as if that would be easy for me." My mother's lips trembled. "This is different." "How?" I asked. Silence. The kind that answers everything without saying a word. I rubbed a hand over my face. "You both need to leave." My father took a step closer, his jaw tight. "We're not leaving until you agree to help your brother." "Then I'm calling the police." He scoffed. "You won't." I pulled out my phone. "I will." Right now, my father grabbed my arm harder than he needed to. "Don't be ridiculous. Let go of me." He didn't, so I jerked my arm free, stepped back, and began dialing. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't threatening. I was protecting myself. My mother's face crumpled as she reached for my father. "Earl, stop. Let's go." She pulled him toward the door, still crying, still pleading. As they stepped outside, my father turned and pointed at me, his voice low and cold. "You'll regret this. Daniel, remember that. Family sticks together." I stared at him. "You didn't think that when you told me I wasn't part of this family anymore." He opened his mouth, but had nothing to say. They left, and with them, the little shred of hope I still carried vanished. I locked the door behind them, not out of anger, but out of necessity, because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel safe around my own parents. And I didn't yet know that what happened that morning was only the beginning. Their desperation hadn't reached its peak, not even close. Before long, I would be forced to make a choice I never imagined, one that changed the entire course of my life. After they left my house that morning, I sat on the couch for a long time, longer than I want to admit, just staring at the closed door. Not because I was afraid they'd come back right away, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside me had shifted permanently. There's a moment in every adult's life when you realize your parents aren't going to change. And sitting there in my quiet living room, I finally accepted it. They weren't going to treat me with respect. They weren't going to hear my no. They weren't going to take responsibility for the chaos they helped create. They would keep pushing until there was nothing left of me to push against. That afternoon, I called Amanda. She'd lived 2 states away, and our relationship, though still new, had become one of the few steady things in my life. She listened in a way no one else ever had. She didn't judge, didn't rush, didn't try to fix anything for me. She just cared, really cared. The moment she picked up, her voice softened. "Daniel, what happened?" So I told her everything. I told her about the private investigator, the break-in, the accusations, the threats, the way my father grabbed my arm, the way my mother walked through my home like it was merchandise in a store. When I finished, Amanda didn't react with shock or outrage. She just breathed in slowly, as if absorbing every detail. "Daniel," she said gently, "this isn't safe anymore. Not emotionally, not physically. You need to protect yourself." I rubbed my forehead. "I know. I don't know where to start." "Start with what you can control," she said. "Start with distance." The word hung in the air. Distance. A simple idea, a painful one too. That night, as I walked through my house, turning off lights, checking locks, not out of habit, but out of fear, something clicked inside me. I'd worked more than 20 years to buy that home, but peace and safety, they were worth far more than the bricks holding that place together. Around midnight, I sent a message to the realtor I'd spoken to once before, back when I casually wondered about moving closer to Amanda, before any of this chaos started. "Are you still available? I'm ready to discuss selling." He answered 10 minutes later. "Of course. Call me in the morning." I slept poorly, but for the first time in days, my mind felt clear. Not happy, not relieved, just decisive. By noon the next day, I met the realtor at a cafe. He asked why I wanted to sell so suddenly, but I only shrugged. "Personal reasons," I said. He didn't push. He ran the numbers quickly. "You'll get a good price, maybe even better if you're willing to move fast." Fast. That was exactly what I wanted. Within 48 hours, the house was listed. Within 72, an offer came in lower than I hoped, but fair, and more importantly, quick. I accepted. The decision felt strange. Not painful, not joyful, just necessary. Like setting a broken bone so it could heal properly. Amanda offered to drive down and help me move. I hesitated. I didn't want to burden her, but she insisted. "I want to," she said. "Let me be there for you the way you've been there for everyone else." So she came, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. We packed boxes in quiet harmony, her handing me tape, me labeling containers, both of us moving carefully through a house that had held both dreams and disappointments. Every room echoed a little as it emptied. Every wall felt farther away. On the last night before the movers arrived, we sat on the living room floor eating takeout. The house around us was half empty, just a shell of what it had been. Amanda leaned her head on my shoulder. "You're doing the right thing," she whispered. "Your family has crossed every boundary you ever set, You're not running away from them. You're moving toward a better life. Toward. That word brought a warmth to my chest I didn't expect. Toward peace. Toward safety. Toward someone who actually cared whether I slept at night. When the moving truck pulled away the next morning, I stood in the driveway for a long moment, staring at the house that had once meant everything to me. It wasn't defeat that I felt. It wasn't regret. It was freedom. And I had no idea that this choice, selling my home, putting distance between myself and my family, was the very thing that would soon expose the truth behind all their lies. A truth they never expected me to uncover. A truth that would lead them straight into the biggest mistake of their lives. I had been living at Amanda's place for almost a month when the call came. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind where the sunlight feels soft and the world feels steady. I'd just made coffee, settling into the small desk she'd set up for me in her guest room. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Same area code as my hometown. My stomach tightened immediately. I answered anyway. Hello? A firm voice replied. Is this Daniel Walker? Yes. Who's calling? This is Officer Hayes with the Lincoln Police Department. I'm calling about an incident involving your parents, Earl and Linda Walker. The mug almost slipped from my hand. What kind of incident? He took a breath, one of those long, professional breaths people take before saying something unbelievable. They were arrested last night for breaking and entering and destruction of property. The room spun. It's strange how your body reacts before your brain can catch up. My heartbeat raced. My throat tightened. My skin went cold. I don't understand. I managed. Breaking into where? The address that he said Buzz is listed as your former residence. A house on Willow Lane. Are you familiar with that property? I closed my eyes. Yes. I sold it a month ago. There was a pause on the line. Officer Hayes letting the gravity of that sink in. Well, he continued, your parents didn't seem to know that. The homeowner returned to find them inside the living room, smashing furniture with baseball bats. I sank into Amanda's desk chair, gripping the edge to steady myself. Baseball bats, I whispered. Yes, sir. They broke a coffee table, 2 lamps, a television, and several personal items. They spray-painted messages on the walls as well. The air left my lungs. What? What did the messages say? Things like thief, traitor, and you ruined this family. My eyes stung. That wasn't my house anymore, I whispered. I know, he said gently, and that's the problem. They believed they were destroying your property. The homeowner wants to press charges. Of course he did. Who wouldn't? How did they explain themselves? I asked. The officer hesitated, then answered plainly. They told us you abandoned them, that you refused to help your brother. They said you forced them to do this. Forced them. Forced them to drive across town. Forced them to break a window. Forced them to wield baseball bats. It was insanity. Pure, heartbreaking insanity. After I hung up, I sat in silence until I felt a warm hand on my shoulder. Amanda had been listening from the hallway. Her face was pale. Daniel, what happened? So I told her. Every detail. Her eyes widened with each piece. Oh my God, she whispered. They could have been shot. What if the homeowner had been armed? What if? I shook my head, unable to process everything at once. She knelt in front of me, taking both my hands. This isn't your fault, she said. Not one bit. People who make choices like that weren't pushed. They were already falling. The next weeks felt surreal, because as the police gathered reports, as lawyers got involved, As numbers were calculated and charges issued, the truth became impossible for my parents to avoid. They were guilty. They admitted it in a plea deal to avoid jail time. But avoiding jail didn't mean avoiding consequences. They owed the homeowner nearly $40,000 in damages, plus court fees, plus legal costs. It added up fast, close to $60,000, and they had no way to pay it. That's when the final blow came. A friend from my hometown, someone who had seen the news, someone who knew my family, called me one afternoon. "Daniel, I thought you should know. Your parents sold their house." I froze. "What?" "They had to," she said, "to pay restitution and, well," she hesitated. "You're not going to like the rest. Just tell me." They gave whatever money was left to Mark. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It was too familiar, too predictable, too painful. They told everyone, my friend continued, that it was their duty to help him, that they couldn't let him suffer. They said he was still in danger. Danger. That lie again. That story they clung to like a shield. But Mark was never in danger. He never owed money to criminals. There were no menacing threats, no lurking figures in the dark. And a week later, I finally got the last piece of the puzzle. Another call, another friend, another truth. "Daniel, those people Mark owed money to, they weren't dangerous. It was a legitimate financial lender. They were going to sue him. That's it. No violence, no threats." The world went quiet. My parents had destroyed a stranger's home, sold their own home, emptied their savings, and thrown away their stability, all for a threat that was never real. All because Mark lied, and because they believed him more than they ever believed me. I sat down on Amanda's couch, hands trembling, heart heavy. She wrapped her arms around me and held me until the shaking stopped. And I knew with a clarity sharper than anything before that even though I loved the people who raised me, I could never go back. Not after this. Not after everything. In the weeks that followed, the fallout hit my family in ways none of them expected, in ways I could no longer afford to carry. My parents moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. The kind of place where the hallway lights flicker and you can hear every argument through the walls. They moved in with Mark. Of course, the 3 of them under the same roof, living off whatever money remained after the restitution and legal fees. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. A neighbor I knew from childhood called me one afternoon. "I've been hearing yelling from their place almost every night," she said. "Your dad shouting, your mom crying, Mark storming out and slamming doors. It's not good." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. I'd grown up around those storms. I knew their rhythm, their shape, their sound. But what I didn't expect was what came next. Attempts to reach me. Not once, not twice, but over and over. First it was calls from unknown numbers, then voicemails from people I barely knew, old church acquaintances, neighbors, distant relatives. "Daniel, your mom wants to talk to you. Your dad says it's important. Mark needs to explain his side." Explain. There was no explanation that could reverse what they'd done. After I ignored the first wave, they found newer tactics. Emails from an account my mother had created. Long messages about how they'd made mistakes, how they'd been stressed, how families should stick together through hard times. And dangling beneath every apology was the same familiar hook. "We need your help. Just a little money until we get back on our feet. Mark is trying to make things right, but he needs support." They weren't reaching out to reconcile. They were reaching out to rebuild the same cycle that had torn everything apart. Still, a small part of me, the child I used to be, wanted to believe the apologies, wanted to think maybe the arrests, the humiliation, the financial ruin had finally woken them up. Amanda sat beside me one evening as I reread one of the emails, her hand resting gently on my knee. "What do you feel when you read that?" she asked. I thought about it. Sadness, yes, anger a little, but mostly exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness from decades of trying to earn love that should have been freely given. "I feel tired," I said quietly, "tired of being responsible for everyone but myself." She squeezed my hand. "That's not love, Daniel. That's manipulation dressed as loyalty." Her words settled in the room, honest and heavy. That night, for the first time in my entire life, I allowed myself to imagine a future without them. A life where my peace mattered, where my boundaries held, where I wasn't the emergency exit for every problem they created. And unexpectedly, it felt warm, comforting, like stepping out of a cold rain and finally closing the door behind you. The next morning, I wrote one final email to my parents. A short one. "I hope you find healing, but I cannot be part of your lives while the patterns remain the same. I wish you well, but I need to protect my future. Please stop contacting me." I didn't sign it with love, but I didn't sign it with anger either. Just my name, plain, simple, clear. They didn't respond, not directly. Instead, the last attempt came through an old friend who called to tell me, "Your mom said they forgive you, and they hope someday you'll come to your senses and help them rebuild." Forgive me. Help them rebuild. That was when the final thread snapped. Not with hatred, but with acceptance. You can't help people who refuse to tell the truth, not even to themselves. You can't save people who choose the fire over the water. You can't fix a story they insist on rewriting. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is step out of the story completely. A few weeks later, Amanda and I were standing in the backyard of a small ranch-style home we'd fallen in love with. It had a big oak tree, a wraparound porch, and enough space for the kind of life I never believed I could have. Amanda turned toward me, her hair catching the late afternoon light. "Daniel," she said softly, "before we make an offer, there's something else I want to ask." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. My breath caught. She opened it slowly. Inside was a simple ring, elegant, steady, like her. "Will you marry me?" she asked. My eyes burned. My throat tightened, but for the first time in a long, long time, the tears were the good kind. "Yes," I whispered. "Absolutely yes." She laughed, relieved, and pulled me into her arms. In that moment, surrounded by quiet and sunlight and the promise of a fresh start, I finally understood something. Sometimes, the family you build is the one that saves you, the one that teaches you how to breathe again, the one that shows you that love isn't supposed to hurt and home isn't supposed to demand sacrifice. It's supposed to give you peace. And for the first time in my life, I was finally stepping into it. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the home I grew up in, about the sound of my mother in the kitchen, the slam of the front door when my father came home from work, the way Mark's laughter used to echo down the hallway before life turned him into someone I barely recognize. There are memories there, good ones, real ones, but memories alone can't hold a family together. And love without boundaries isn't love, it's surrender. For a long time, I thought choosing myself made me selfish. Walking away felt like abandoning them. But the older I get, the more I understand that sometimes the most painful decision is the healthiest one. You can care about people and still choose not to let them hurt you again. You can hope the best for them and still close the door when they refuse to change. You can love your family and still decide not to be their sacrifice. The truth is, peace is not given. It is built step by step, choice by choice, boundary by boundary. I built mine the day I walked out of my parents' house. I protected it the day I told them no, and I honored it the day I chose a different future with someone who understands what love should look like: steady, honest, gentle, and free. Amanda and I are planning our wedding now. Some mornings we sit on our porch with coffee, talking about the garden we want to plant in the spring or the old dog we hope to adopt. Simple dreams, quiet dreams, the kind that don't demand anything except presence and kindness. And every so often, a thought settles in my mind, calm and certain. I didn't lose a family. I found a better one. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real, because it was chosen, because it was mine. If you've ever felt torn between loyalty and survival, between keeping the peace and keeping yourself safe, I hope my story reminds you that your life, your heart, and your future matter too. You deserve stability. You deserve to be heard. You deserve peace that doesn't come with conditions. Thank you for listening and for spending your time with me today. If this story resonated with you even a little, feel free to share your thoughts. And if you'd like to hear more stories about choosing yourself when no one else will, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what's coming next. Because sometimes the family you create is far better than the one you were born into.